Now to continue with this, now we're going to say, well, what if the thing seems to be factored, but it's not equal to 0, right? If it was equal to 0, let each factor equal to 0, and then you're good to go. However, the left side seems to be factored, the right side is not 0. So when that happens, unfactor it. Let me distribute the 9x over. So I'm going to get 9x squared minus 9x. Now let me distribute the 3 plus 3x minus 3. This is equal to negative 8. At least combine the like terms. So I'm just going to have 9x squared minus 6x minus 3 is equal to negative 8. Now I want to solve this using the quadratic formula. So my minus 8, I'm going to move it to the left as a plus 8. So I have 9x squared minus 6x plus 5 is equal to 0. I see my A is 9, my B is negative 6, and my C is 5. Let me remember the quadratic formula. I want to work the square root part first. So I'm going to do negative 6 all squared minus 4 times 9 times 5, all inside the square root. So basically I have 36 minus 180 all inside the square root. Now 36 minus 180, that gives me a negative number. That will give me negative 144. I know 144, the square root of 144 is 12. So I'm going to say the square root of a negative 144 will be 12i. Remember, it's a negative. All right, so now that I did the square root, I'm going to do the whole formula. Negative b, I'm just going to write 6, because the negative of a negative, it's positive, plus or minus 12i over 18. So if I use the plus sign, I'm going to have 6 plus 12i over 18. I cannot combine the top, but at least I can divide all my numbers by 6. So I'm going to say, in this case, x is equal to 1 plus 2i over 3. That's one solution. Now, if I use the minus sign, I get 6 minus 12i over 18. Once again, I cannot combine the top, but I can at least simplify, divide everything by 6. And I'm going to say the other solution of x will be 1 minus 2i over 3. One thing with the discriminant, the b squared minus 4ac, we're going to call that discriminant, the thing that is inside the square root. If it gives me a positive number and the square root is a perfect square, I'm thinking of the square root of 16 as an example, my answer will be 2 rational solutions. That means I'm going to use whole numbers, but I can write it as a fraction. The fraction might simplify to a whole number. So I could get an answer like 2 over 3, or I could get something like 8 over 4, which simplifies to a whole number. Now, if I get my discriminant to be positive, but it's not a perfect square root, like the square root of 15th, my answer will be irrational solutions. As an example of irrational solution, I get something like 2 plus radical 3 over 4. And then obviously 2 minus radical 3 over 4. So I will have the radical sign in there if my answer is positive, but not a perfect square. Now, if my answer is 0, we saw that earlier, I'm just going to get one rational solution. Just one solution, and that's it. Now, if my square root of it's a negative, which we just saw right now, I'm going to get 2 non-real complex solutions. So that means I'm going to have an I somewhere in there. All right, let's take a look at the discriminant. Once again, it's just the square root. Here it says find a discriminant. Use it to predict the numbered and type of solutions for each equation. Let me remember my discriminant. B squared minus 4ac. I see here my A is 6, my B is negative 1, and my C is negative 15. So I'm doing B squared minus 4ac So again, my A is 6, my B is -1, and my C is -15. So I'm looking at -1 squared minus 4 times 6 times a -15. All this is going to be inside the square root. So I have 1 plus, because negative times a negative will make it positive, 1 times, now 4 times 6 times 15, that gives me 360. All this inside the square root, and I get, obviously, 361. Then I ask, is 361 a perfect square? So I'm going to check. The square root of 361 happens to be 19. It is a perfect square, so I will be getting 2 rational solutions. Let's take a look at B. My A is 3, my B is -4, and my C is 5. Let me remember the quadratic formula. I'm just looking at the discriminant, so -4 squared minus 4 times 3 times 5. All this inside the square root. So I have 16 minus 4 times 3 times 5, that's 60. 16 minus 60, that is 44, -44. Have my discriminant to be negative. So I'm going to get 2 non-real complex solutions.